season to be jolly. Fa la la, fa la la. Fill the meat cup tray and barrel. Fa la la, fa la la. Troll the ancient Christmas carol. Fa la la, fa la la.
See the flowing bowl before us.
Fa la la, fa la la. Strike the harp and join the chorus. Fa la la, fa la la. Follow me in merry measure. Fa la la, while I sing of beauty's treasure. Fa la la, fa la la.
Across the waiting old year passes.
Fa la la la, fa la la la. Hail the new ye lads and lasses. Fa la la la, fa la la la. Nothing all together. Fa la la la. Leave us of the wind and weather. Fa la la la, fa la la la.
Oh, hello, and welcome to this Cholmondeley Choral Society's big Christmas medley on Twelfth night, or, as has been pointed out to me, the last possible day I could call Christmas. I'm William Glendinning, and it is my pleasure to present to you some of the goings-on of Cholmondeley Choral Society and some of our musical friends. So, open a bottle, another one, and sit back and relax as we numb our senses to the impending lockdown and drain the dregs of festive cheer. That wonderful appetizer you just heard was, of course, Deck the Hall, singular, arranged for Cholmondeley Choral Society by Henry Page. We'll be hearing more from him later. And accompanied by the Keats Quartet and Tom Harrison on trumpet. Let's hear more from those wonderful musicians. And of course, I want you to sing along, so you've got words for this one. If you don't want to sing along, that probably means you haven't had a drink yet, so use this time wisely. Here's While Shepherds Watch Their Flocks by Night.
While shepherds watch their flocks by night, all seated on the ground, the angel of the Lord came down, and glory shone around.
Fear not, said he,
For mighty dread hath seized their troubled mind. Glad tidings of great joy I bring to you and all mankind. To you in David's town this day is born of David's line a Saviour who is Christ the Lord, and this shall be her sign. The heavenly babe you there shall find, to human view displayed, all meekly wrapped in swathing bands and in a manger laid. Thus spake the seraph, and forthwith appeared a shining throng of angels praising God, who thus addressed their joyful song. All glory be to God on high, and to the earth be peace, goodwill is all from earth to men, begin and never cease.
Lovely to hear you all in such fine voice. I'm afraid your participation does not stop there. It's time for our Christmas quiz. This quiz comes in 3 parts, 3 rounds of questions and an answers section. So you have 10 seconds to grab a piece of paper and a pen. Right, time's up. Here's Janine with your starter for 10.
Hello. Now is that intellectual moment, the brain-stretching Christmas quiz. So if you want to join in, please grab a pencil and paper and note down your answers. And later on, you'll find that it's 1 point per answer, per right answer, but number 5, which I will remind you of, has got 3 bits to it, which brings you to a final score of 18. And be warned, there are some cracker questions, though they aren't at all sensible. I'll try and stop this plant from getting in the way, but it says hello too. Number 1. What is the musical connection between O Maryland, My Maryland, The Red Flag and Tannenbaum, or O Christmas Tree? What's the musical connection between O Maryland, My Maryland, The Red Flag and the carol Tannenbaum? Number 2, here is a cracker joke which has no sensible answer whatsoever, so use your imagination. What is the best present a musician could ever receive? What is the best present a musician could ever receive? Number 3, which carol contains a wild lament from a force of nature? Which carol contains a wild lament from a force of nature? Number 4, why did the turkey insist on playing Ravel's Bolero? Why did this turkey insist on playing Ravel's Bolero despite its imminent demise? Number 5, name 3 of Rudolph and Sander's reindeer pals. 3 of those reindeer who draw the sleigh.
No Googling those answers. Right, grab your coats. We're off to Bohemia to meet a certain king with the Ephemeris duo.
The king Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even. Brightly shone the moon that night, for the frost was cruel, when a poor man came in sight, gathering winter fuel. Hither, page, and stand by me, if thou know'st it telling. Yonder peasant, who is he? Where and what his dwelling?
He is a goodly Kent's underneath the mountain, right against the forest fence, by St. Agnes' fountain.
Bring me flesh and bring me wine, bring me pine logs hither. Thou and I will see him dine, when we bear them thither. Page and lord, and forth they went together, through the rude wind's wild lament, and the bitter weather.
Sire, the night is darker now, and the wind blows stronger. Fails my heart, I know not how, I can go no longer.
Mark my footsteps, good my page, tread thou in them boldly. Thou shalt find the winter's rage, freeze thy bloodless coldly. In his master's steps he trod, where the snow lay dinted. He was in the very sword, which the saint had printed. Wherefore Christian men be sure, wealth or rank possessing, he who now will bless the poor, shall yourselves find blessing.
Number 6, and this is a crazy cracker question. Why are sopranos excellent at buying Christmas presents? Why are they so good at buying Christmas presents? And number 7, what or who is being called to ransom captive Israel here? Listen carefully and disentangle the letters to find the name. L-E-E, M for mummy, M for mummy, U, N for Nigel, A for animal. Say again, L-E-E, M-M-U-N-A. What or who is being called to ransom poor captive Israel? Number 8, another silly cracker question. Why is Parliament like ancient Bethlehem? You may well ask. Why is Parliament like ancient Bethlehem? Number 9, which group of people traditionally associated with Christ's birth says farewell in a work by Berlioz? Which group of people traditionally associated with the birth of Christ says farewell in a work by Berlioz? And number 10, daft question again. How does a dog listen to Christmas songs and messages? How does this very clever dog listen to Christmas songs and messages?
I love Good King Wenceslas. A great carol and a really lovely story. Talking of great stories, I wonder how our pilgrims are getting on from our last concert. Do you think they've reached Santiago yet? More great work from the Ephemeris duo there, and ably assisted by Charlotte Sleet and Jessica Gillingwater, and of course, the wonderful Cholmondeley Choral Society. Now, I hope your pencils are still at hand, as it's time for the third and final round of our quiz, presented here by Jeanne.
A few more Christmas questions for you. Number 11. Be good, for goodness sake. Who will know if you haven't been and take away your Christmas fun? Number 12. Why are Christmas trees very bad at knitting silly reindeer jumpers? Number 13. Which 20th century Christmas choral work contains a rose, a baby warrior, and clocks with their books? Number 14. What did Adam say the day before Christmas? It's old but fun. Number 15. Which city is the setting for a fairy tale in which two singers hurl insults at each other? And the bonus question of the evening. Which well-known and innocent Christmas song was banned by the Vatican for apparently advocating adultery?
God rest you, merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. For Jesus Christ our Saviour was born on Christmas Day, to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
From God our Heavenly Father, a blessed angel came, and unto certain shepherds brought tidings of the same, how that in Bethlehem was born the Son of God by name. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
The shepherds at those tidings rejoiced much in mind, and left their flocks a-feeding in tempest, storm, and wind, and went to Bethlehem straightway this blessed babe to find. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. But when to Bethlehem they came, whereat this infant lay, they found him in a manger, where oxen feed on hay. His mother Mary kneeling unto the Lord did pray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. Now to the Lord sing praises, all you within this place, and with true love and brotherhood each other now embrace. This holy tide of Christmas all others doth deface. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
Gosh, we've had a lot of Davide and Simone today, haven't we? Or the Ephemeris duo, as they're known. We've had them in Maria Martram with the Pilgrims. We've had them in Good King Wenceslas. We had them just then in God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. And we've got them again at the end with an arrangement of a new carol in which they are joining us, and not just them, but also the Keats Quartet and Tom Harrison. And this carol has been arranged, almost built for us by the composer Henry Page. And we're lucky enough to have Henry Page with us today for a chat. Hi, Henry. Thanks for joining us. Henry? Henry? Henry?
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. Cheers.
I really wanted to ask you about what you think makes a Christmas carol and about how you approach the two wonderful pieces you've arranged for us. But I thought actually to start with, I should probably ask you, what is a Christmas carol and how does that differentiate between a Christmas piece or a Christmas song?
I think if one goes back to the origin of what a carol is, inherently it is just a celebratory song with no inherent connection to Christmas. Its main meaning was to dance and to make merry, nothing to do with the church. With that in mind, we must be aware, I think, not to let it steep too much into religion and be aware of the physicality of it, the dance-like aspect, the celebratory aspect, and be that in connection to the winter solstice or the Christian festival. And I think that it's worth noting at the time when carols were popular in the secular context that church ensembles would have sung anthems and antiphons, whereas people would have sung carols. So it is deeply connected with the folk tradition.
I think that's really fascinating. So could you say that Christmas carols or carolling predates Christmas in Britain?
Carols, yes, are essentially pagan. They're songs performed to a circle, and they've been indoctrinated by Christianity, as many traditions have been, and particularly associated with Christmas time. Though Easter carols are still sung in some places, and in fact, after the English Civil War, the Puritans forbade the practice of singing Christmas carols. Entertainment and religion were seen as mutually exclusive. Like Catholicism after the Reformation, they continued in secret in many places.
Illicit carol singing does sound quite fun. I actually went to a lecture last year which suggested that O Come All Ye Faithful was actually a secret Jacobean message. But the sound that we associate with Christmas carols, Henry, when could we pin that sound down to?
Well, despite the long history of carolling, the context and application of carols, the format that we're familiar with today, is surprisingly recent, although early forms of certain songs such as God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen and Good King Wenceslas can be found in earlier books. Their origin lies in the 16th century publication Pie Cantionis, as well as more recent collections that do obviously predate the tradition that we know today, such as Christmas Carols Ancient and Modern, which is a 19th century publication, and my personal favourite, which is the Oxford Carol Book, and that was 1928, so somewhat more recently.
You've mentioned dance, physicality, luminosity, melody, but what really, for you, captures Christmas in a carol?
Oh, that's a
and which
difficult
instruments
question.
do you think sound the most
I mean,
Christmassy?
it's hard because carols have such a variety of sound worlds, from the exciting, jubilant, rhythmic sounds of William Matthias's Sir Christmas to In the Bleak Midwinter again, or Warlock's Bethlehem Down. That wonderful sense of humble, sacred commitment. And again, this celebratory nature, congregational engagement is inherently Christmassy, but then so, of course, because of the Christmas story, is the vulnerable nature of the infant child. And I think as long as you pick one of the important essences, one of the important aspects of the narrative from the Christmas story, and bring it out and sufficiently engage with the text, then I think you'll successfully engage your talents in making a good piece, hopefully an effective piece, certainly. I suppose if we go back to the idea of carols being inherently dance-like and energised and having vivacity and being fun, then I suppose a motivic aspect or a melodic aspect is good, but fun rhythms, something that's essentially catchy, certainly that may be able to be reproduced easily by a congregation, and naughty harmonies, I think. Nothing overly difficult, but things that are a little bit scrunchy and unforgettable. I think everybody loves the rather left field harmonisations in the Descant verses by Wilcox of "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" and "O Come All Ye Faithful." And in terms of instruments specifically, I think obviously the organ, that king of the instruments, because it's so inextricably a church instrument and heralds a big end of a service or beginning of a service that has that grandeur. I think that feels very Christmassy, and especially whenever it has a registration, a setting of stops, an organisation of stops that's primarily festal. So to that extent as well, of course, the trumpet, and you think obviously of the association between angels and trumpets and the announcement of Jesus' coming, Jesus' birth. I think that's inherently Christmassy.
Henry, the first piece we've heard today that you arranged for us was Deck the Hall. What does this piece make you feel? What does the tune tell you that it's about? And maybe how does the narrative then contextualise that?
Well, I think Deck the Halls has a highly energised tune and a call and response quality, which emanates chiefly from the 2-bar phrases, both themselves in groups of 2. So you have deck the hall with bells of la 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 la. So it's 2 sets of 2, and you very much feel like one side sings and the other side sings. It's very antiphonal. It's verb-based declaration as well, so it's energised and full of life. The dotted rhythms, and as I say, this hocketing, this pathing, the rhythmic material reinforces this, and there's a sense of youthful excitement in the whole carol, I think. The use of simple intervallic motifs, often moving by step, helps it to be easy to latch onto. It consolidates as well, I think, that sense of childlike enthusiasm. And I think in terms of trying to lead into that, I wanted to provide a fanfare-like prelude that very much welcomed the audience with energy and a declamatory voice. Obviously, the trumpet, which is one of the reasons I chose that, and so something very declamatory and announcing that this carol service, indeed this arrangement, was to start, but also I wanted to present something of the pastoral air with that as well.
Was this idea of the strings being pastoral born of their sound, or was it something extraneous you wanted to impart, such as the origins of the tune or the shepherds in the story?
I think the pastoral aspect was very much stylistically to do with juxtaposing character. I wanted the strings to have a different energy in the prelude material. There's still that dormant energy that fully realises itself when the voices enter, but the strings have a more sostenuto role when you start, as if they are fleshing out the landscape a little more, sort of providing that hyreth, the Welsh word for the sense of longing for home. So that almost, and I use anything connecting to being overly nationalistic advisedly. So let's say that patriotism where one longs for the homeland, and then that connection of traditional music and land. And going back to this idea of the trumpet being the declamatory instrument, I really obviously wanted to bring a sense of anticipation to its line and roll. So I started with a sort of lontano intonation that gives that feeling of hark, I hear it upon the air. And that announcement that it is Christmas, that it's coming up, and I feel people very clearly identify with that orally, especially the sound of the trumpet doing that, and the combination of those two, the strings and the trumpet, feel very noble yet humble, and I think that references, it's in sound world and material, the connection of carols to folk music, which is something I really want to bring across, and I think within that, obviously, there's that identification of land and music.
Which, of course, leads us nicely to the May Carol, a proper folk melody here.
Oh, absolutely. Very much so, indeed. And I love that the Oxford Carol book, once it came into more popular circulation, is chiefly populated by Ralph Vaughan Williams's harmonisations, and those themselves are very much based upon folk music that he heard from when he was a child. And of course, the man himself has stretched across the entire spectrum of English choral music, from festival anthems with SATB and organ to parochial hymnal settings to these folk song arrangements. And I feel that that's the childhood memories of English folk tunes, the combination of local ditties and childhood recollections, feels very Christmassy indeed. And there is a timeless reverberance to the tune, which Ralph Vaughan Williams harmonised for SATB. A lot of the tonic dominant movement, the simple bi-step lines, it makes it very easy to pick up. And there's also something of a stark quality to the E minor tonality, which I wanted to retain. And thanks to that aforementioned harmonisation and increased major minor ambiguity, which brings across that sense of mystery, rather in the lineage of, say, the Coventry Carol.
What was the impact of the text, and given the instruments you've chosen or given to use, what are you trying to reflect in that?
Well, I think a lot of the text features moments that seem applicable for specific voicings, and especially the ends of phrases and verses where I sought to continue the texture on from the last statements in the text to what would be picked up by the instruments. For instance, there's a fragility in verse 4 where mother dresses the Christmas tree. That it's sort of dolce, but it's quite parochial and also timeless. There's a simplicity to it and a humbleness to it, and I thought the upper voices on their own suited this rather well. I thought the sparsity going into the T.S. de Picardy in the strings, you'll hear the strings enter on this major chord at the end. I've instances in most verses where the verse will end in the minor key. This ends in the major, and there's that sense because the text, or the words talk of the room being filled with light, and this major luminosity coming from nowhere I felt was very, very apt for that. I was also lucky enough to be able to use a lute, which is a wonderful opportunity. I thought that really amplified that sense of timelessness as well as that of grace and fragility. By contrast, the third verse talks of the Son of God ruling in heaven again, and I liked the stoicism of male voices for that. I felt it had a certain, if not bluntness, a sort of uniform strength, and I set this against a simple cello counter melody, which I illuminated, if you will, with simple chords on the lute. Having the opportunity, I think, for such a range of instruments, the strings, the simple percussion, the lute and the trumpet, really allowed to dig into the simplicity of the verse and provide old folk-like variations and deviations from the melody, and this was a real benefit. So the lute's language is obviously primarily chordal, just denoting certain points. The string language is quite pastoral. It sounds a little like Ralph Vaughan Williams or Warlock at points, and the trumpet has maybe that slightly more grand festal air to it, and the opportunity to rearrange these certain points was another benefit of the timelessness of this simple folk-like melody, and hopefully the variations come across maybe in a slightly Mahlerian-esque context as a half-remembered melody, maybe that one was taught when young, coming across the air.
I couldn't agree more. I think these timeless ideas and sounds offer us a real sense of belonging and identity, which against any of our current backdrops offers us a real sense of comfort and perhaps commutivity as well. I think the two carols you've arranged capture that really marvellously, with an added sense of hope and maybe glitter. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Henry, and happy Christmas.
A very happy Christmas to you.
I can't wait to hear it. Well, maybe I could wait if there was something really good coming up next. Maybe, say, if one of our basses, maybe Bob Williams, decided to read some Dylan Thomas accompanied by the Keats Quartet. I'm glad I sat down for this one.
One Christmas was so much like another in those years around the Seatown corner now, and out of all sound except the distant speaking of the voices I sometimes hear a moment before sleep, that I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6. All the Christmases rolled down toward the two-tongued sea, like a cold and headlong moon bundling down the sky that was our street. And they stop at the rim of the ice-edged fish-freezing waves, and I plunge my hand in the snow and bring out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into that wool-white, bell-tongued ball of holidays resting at the rim of the carol-singing sea, and out comes Mrs. Prothero and the firemen. It was afternoon on the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden waiting for cats with her son, Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December in my memory is white as Lapland, though there were no reindeers, but there were cats, patient, cold, and callous. Our hands are wrapped in socks. We waited to snowball the cats. Sleek and long as jaguars and horrible whiskered, spitting and snarling, they would slink and sidle over the white back garden walls, and the lynx-eyed hunters, Jim and I, fur-capped and moccasined trappers from Hudson Bay off Mumbles Road, would hurl our deadly snowballs at the green of their eyes. The wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen in the muffling silence of the eternal snows, eternal ever since Wednesday, that we never heard Mrs. Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden, or if we heard it at all, it was, to us, like the far-off challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbour's polar cat. But soon the voice grew louder. "Fire!" cried Mrs. Prothero, and she beat the dinner gong, and we ran down the garden with the snowballs in our arms, toward the house, and smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombilating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin like a town crier in Pompeii. This was better than all the cats in Wales standing on the wall in a row. We bounded into the house, laden with snowballs, and stopped at the open door of the smoke-filled room. Something was burning all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Prothero, who always slept there after midday dinner with a newspaper over his face. But he was standing in the middle of the room saying, "A fine Christmas," and smacking at the smoke with a slipper. "Call the fire brigade," cried Mrs. Prothero as she beat the gong. "They won't be there," said Mr. Prothero. "It's Christmas." There was no fire to be seen, only clouds of smoke, and Mr. Prothero standing in the middle of them waving his slipper as though he were conducting. "Do something," he said, and we threw all our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero and ran out of the house to the telephone box. "Let's call the police as well," Jim said, "and the ambulance, and Ernie Jenkins, he likes fires." But we only called the fire brigade, and soon the fire engine came, and 3 tall men in helmets brought a hose into the house, and Mr. Prothero got out just in time before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when the firemen turned off the hose and were standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to them. She said the right thing, always. She looked at the 3 tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing among the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, and she said, "Would you like anything to read?" There were always uncles at Christmas, the same uncles, and on Christmas morning, with dog-disturbing whistle and sugar fags, I would scour the swayed town for the news of the little world, and find always a dead bird by the post office or by the white deserted swings, perhaps a robin, all but one of his fires out. Men and women wading or scooping back from chapel with taproom noses and wind-bust cheeks. Mistletoe hung from the gas brackets in all the front parlours. There was sherry and walnuts and bottled beer and crackers by the dessert spoons, and cats in their furabouts watched the fires, and the high-heaped fire spat, all ready for the chestnuts and the mulling pokers. Some few large men sat in the front parlours without their collars, uncles almost certainly, trying out their new cigars, holding them out judiciously at arm's length, returning them to their mouths, coughing, and then holding them out again as though waiting for the explosion. And some few small aunts, not wanted in the kitchen, nor anywhere else for that matter, sat on the very edge of their chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break, like faded cups and saucers. For dinner we had turkey and blazing pudding, and after dinner the uncles sat in front of the fire, loosened all their buttons, put their large moist hands over their watch chains, groaned a little, and slept. Mothers, aunts and sisters scuttled to and fro, bearing tureens. Auntie Bessie, who'd already been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, whimpered by the sideboard and had some elderberry wine. The dog was sick. Auntie Dosey had to have 3 aspirins. But Auntie Hannah, who liked port, stood in the middle of the snowbound backyard singing like a big bosomed thrush. I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up to, and when they burst, which they all did, the uncles jumped and rumbled in the rich and heavy afternoon, the uncles breathing like dolphins and the snow descending. I would sit among festoons and Chinese lanterns and nibble dates and try to make a model man of war following the instructions for little engineers and produce what might be mistaken for a sea-going tram-car. Bring out the tall tales now that we told by the fire, as the gaslight bubbled like a diver. Ghosts wooed like owls in the long nights when I dared not look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubbyhole under the stairs, and the gas meter ticked. And I remember that we went singing carols once, when there wasn't the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets. At the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house, and we stumbled up the darkness of the drive that night, each one of us afraid, each one holding a stone in his hand just in case, and all of us too brave to say a word. The wind through the trees made noises as of old and unpleasant, and maybe web-footed men wheezing in caves. We reached the black bulk of the house. What shall we give them? Hark the herald? No, Jack said. Good King Wenceslas. I'll count 3. 1, 2, 3, and we began to sing. Our voices high and seemingly distant in the snow-felted darkness round the house that was occupied by nobody we knew. We stood close together near the dark door. Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, and then a small dry voice, like the voice of someone who had not spoken for a long time, joined our singing. A small, dry, eggshell voice from the other side of the door. A small, dry voice through the keyhole. And when we stopped running, we were outside our house. Front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle gulping gas. Everything was good again and shone over the town. Perhaps it was a ghost, Jim said. Perhaps it was trolls, Dad said, who was always reading. Let's go in and see if there's any jelly left, Jack said. And we did that. Always on Christmas night there was music. An uncle played the fiddle. A cousin sang Jerry Ripe. Another uncle sang Drake's drum. It was very warm in the little house. Auntie Hannah, who had now got onto the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death, and then another in which she said her heart was like a bird's nest. Then everybody laughed again, and then I went to bed. Looking through my bedroom window, out into the moonlight and the unending smoke-coloured snow, I could see the lights in the windows of all the other houses on our hill, and hear the music rising from them up the long, steady, falling night. I turned the gas down. I got into bed. I said some words to the close and holy darkness, and then I slept.
Now is the moment you've all been waiting for, of course, the answers. Good luck. What is that musical connection between O Maryland, My Maryland, the Red Flag, and the Carol Tannenbaum? They all have exactly the same tune, believe it or not. Number 2, that awful cracker joke, a broken drum. You can't beat it is the answer to what is the best present a musician could ever receive. Ha, ha, ha. Number 3, which carol contains a wild lament from a force of nature? That's Good King Wenceslas with that howling wind that scares the page so much. Number 4, our turkey, despite the threat, is anxious to do a swan song of Ravel's Bolero because it has the drumsticks. Nasty one. Number 5, you have a choice here. This is where you can score yourself 3 instead of 1. Rudolph's and Sanders' reindeer pals, you have Dancer and Prancer and Dasher and Vixen and Blitzen and Comet and Cupid and Donna, who somehow got astray from Blitzen here. Donna and Blitzen. Any 3 of these. All right. Number 6, to remind you of the question. Why are sopranos so very good at buying Christmas presents and everything? Because they get discount prices. Ow. Number 7. What or who is being called to ransom captive Israel? It is, of course, Emmanuel. And number 8. Why is Parliament like ancient Bethlehem? Well, it takes a miracle to find 3 wise men there, obviously. And 9, that group of people traditionally associated with Christ's birth says farewell in a work by Berlioz, which is The Shepherd. In their farewell, the shepherd's farewell, l'adieu des bergers, if you want to be French about it. 10, how does the dog listen to Christmas songs and messages? Woof, 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 on a mobile phone. Merry Christmas.
To remind you of the questions before you have your answers at hand, number 11, be good for goodness sake. Who will know if you haven't been and take away your Christmas fun? Many choices, any variation of Father Christmas. Number 12, why are Christmas trees very bad at knitting silly reindeer jumpers? I'm sure you remembered this one. Because they drop their needles. Right, number 13. Number 13, which 20th century Christmas choral work contains a rose, a baby warrior, and clerks with their books? The answer, Britain's A Ceremony of Carols. Number 14, what did Adam say the day before Christmas to Eve? It's Christmas Eve, or it's Christmas Eve. Number 15, which city is a setting for a fairy tale in which 2 singers hurl insults at each other? The city, New York. And for your bonus question, which well-known and innocent Christmas song was banned by the Vatican for apparently advocating adultery? I saw Mommy kissing Santa Claus. I hope you did well.
Well, how did you do? I'm sure you fared better than me. Thank you so much for taking part and joining in with us on this 12th night. I hope that we've helped you drain that last drop of festive cheer and that stiffened your resolve and your defences as we head back out into our lockdown winter. Don't worry, the days are already getting longer. Spring is on its way. I hope you've all had the happiest of Christmases or Hanukkahs or yours or whatever you celebrate this festive season. And all that's left for me to say is, most sincerely, that I hope that I get to see you in person in 2021. And may we all have a very happy new year. God, that is really good.
Awake, awake, good people, awake and you shall hear that Christ has died for our sins, for he loved us so dear.
The little child in Bethlehem, he was a king indeed. For he came down from heaven above to help our world in need.
He dwells again in heaven's realm, the Son of God today, and still he loves his little ones and hears them when they pray.
When Mother trims the Christmas tree, which fills the room with light, she tells me of the wondrous star that made the dark world bright.
She says the star